Just waiting on some copies on a few documents and we'll get going. All right. Welcome to the Appropriations Committee. We have a number of things on our agenda. We obviously have the budget of the state of Maryland, which I know everyone's here for, but before we start that, we have a number of bills to vote on. So we'll start with House Bill 1196. Delegate Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. House Bill 1196. Just to give a summary, this is a bill that will essentially provide funding for LEAs to have dedicated blueprint implementation coordinators to ensure that the investments we're making have the proper oversight and support. But this bill does have two amendments. Amendment number 1 is technical. Amendment number 2 exempts a certain amount of funding for school education formulas and provides additional funding in certain circumstances, and wealth equalizes certain funding. Additionally, I have an amendment at the desk which would push the consultant study in the blueprint bill back to accommodate for the delay in blueprint. This was a date missed in the corrective bill last session. Move the amendments.
Second.
Any discussion on the amendments? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. The amendments pass. Move the bill as amended.
Second.
Any discussion on the bill? Roll call.
Vice Chair Chang. Vice Chair Chang is a yay. Delegate Corman. Delegate Corman is a yay. Delegate Smith. Delegate Smith is a yay. Delegate Resnick. Delegate Resnick is a yay. Delegate Bridges. Delegate Bridges is a yay. Delegate Lewis. Delegate Lewis is a yay. Delegate Geist. Delegate Geist is a yay. Delegate Shetty. Delegate Shetty is a yay. Delegate Anderson. Delegate Anderson is a yay. Delegate Acevero. Delegate Acevero is a yay. Delegate McComas. Delegate McComas is a yay. Delegate Mangione. Delegate Mangione is a no. Delegate Stanko. Delegate Stanko is a yay. Delegate Hinnenbaugh. Delegate Hinnenbaugh is a yay. Delegate McCaskill. Delegate McCaskill is a yay. Delegate Harris. Delegate Harris is a yay. Delegate Edelson. Delegate Edelson is a yay. Delegate Ivy. Delegate Ivy is a yay. Delegate Metzger. Delegate Metzger is a yay. Delegate Watson. Delegate Watson is a yay. Delegate Solomon. Delegate Solomon is a yay. Delegate Forbes. Delegate Forbes is a yay.
All right, the bill passes. House Bill 546, Delegate Solomon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is the administration's bill on the service year option, and we heard this a couple of weeks ago. There are two amendments in your packet on this bill. Amendment number 1 repeals the Maryland Corps program, as many of the provisions in Maryland Corps are duplicative to the creation of the new department that this bill would do, so essentially combines those two programs into one. And then amendment number 2 cleans up, again, some of those reconciliation pieces and adds amendments from MACO. We heard from the disability community, the Maryland Disabilities Coalition had an amendment that's been adopted, and the Service Year Alliance. Motion to move the amendments.
Discussion on the amendments. Delegate Geist.
So what was this MACO amendment? What did it do?
On that one.
Sorry, I'm just running the mics up here too. It included local governments as participating entities in the program.
All right, any other discussion on the amendments? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, raise your hand. The amendments pass.
Second.
Any discussion on the bill? Roll call.
Vice Chair Chang. Vice Chair Chang is a yay. Delegate Corman. Delegate Corman is a yay. Delegate Smith. Delegate Smith is a yay. Delegate Resnick. Delegate Resnick is a yay. Delegate Bridges. Delegate Bridges is a yay. Delegate Lewis. Delegate Lewis is a yay. Delegate Geist. Delegate Geist is a yay. Delegate Shetty. Delegate Shetty is a yay. Delegate Anderson. Delegate Anderson is a yay. Delegate Acevero. Delegate Acevero is a yay. Delegate McComas. Delegate McComas is a yay. Delegate Mangione. Delegate Mangione is a no. Delegate Stanco. Delegate Stanco is a yay. Delegate Hinnebaugh. Delegate Hinnebaugh is a yay. Delegate McCaskill. Delegate McCaskill is a yay. Delegate Harris. Delegate Harris is a yay. Delegate Edelson. Delegate Edelson is a yay. Delegate Ivy. Delegate Ivy is a yay. Delegate Metzger. Delegate Metzger is a yay. Delegate Watson. Delegate Watson is a yay. Delegate Solomon. Delegate Solomon is a yay. Delegate Forbes. Delegate Forbes is a yay.
All right, bill passes. House Bill 982 is Speaker Jones's bill. You'll be familiar with this. It creates programs and scholarships for human services careers, probation agents, and state contributions to supplemental retirement plans. Bill does have a number of amendments. Amendment number 1 replaces the terms needed position with targeted positions and modifies the list of eligible positions. Amendment number 2 provides that only certain portion of the bill will terminate in 5 years, the pilot program for HSC. The amendment requires the department to collaborate with scholarship recipients to develop a work schedule for the recipients and maintain an appropriate course load. The amendment adds language to give details about how the employees are selected and compensated to serve as mentors. The amendment strikes language authorizing the employee to work in a certain position before obtaining necessary credential. Finally, the amendment removes certain preference for participants in the pilot program for human services careers, so all DHS employees will be equally considered for the scholarship. Move the amendments.
Second.
Any discussion on the amendments? All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it. Move the bill as amended.
Second.
Any discussion on the bill? Roll call.
Vice Chair Chang. Vice Chair Corman. Delegate Corman is a yay. Delegate Smith. Delegate Smith is a yay. Delegate Resnick. Delegate Resnick is a yay. Delegate Bridges. Delegate Bridges is a yay. Delegate Lewis. Delegate Lewis is a yay. Delegate Geist. Delegate Geist is a no. Delegate Shetty. Delegate Shetty is a yay. Delegate Anderson. Delegate Anderson is a yay. Delegate Acevero. Delegate Acevero is a yay. Delegate McComas. Delegate McComas is a yay. Delegate Mangione. Delegate Mangione is a yay. Delegate Stanco. Delegate Stanco is a yay. Delegate Hinnebaugh. Delegate Hinnebaugh is a yay. Delegate McCaskill. Delegate McCaskill is a yay. Delegate Harris. Delegate Harris is a yay. Delegate Edelson. Delegate Edelson is a yay. Delegate Ivy. Delegate Ivy is a yay. Delegate Metzger. Delegate Metzger is a yay. Delegate Watson. Delegate Watson is a yay. Delegate Solomon. Delegate Solomon is a yay. Delegate Forbes. Delegate Forbes is a yay.
House Bill 1219, the Maryland Educator Shortage Act of 2023. As amended, this bill creates a Maryland Educator Recruitment, Retention, and Diversity Dashboard to provide demographic information on teachers and teacher interns disaggregated by school and school system. This bill also creates an alternative pathway to be eligible as a highly qualified staff member for publicly funded pre-K. The bill alters requirements for the Nancy Grassmick program within the Janet Hoffman Loan Forgiveness Program to make it easier for teachers and mental health professionals to receive assistance. The bill makes alterations to the Teacher Fellows for Maryland program to make the program's requirements less strict and to give preference for scholarships to those who have been employed in a public school or publicly funded pre-K program within the last 5 years. Finally, the bill creates the Teacher Development Retention Program to offer supports to students in institutions of higher education who are interested in pursuing a career in the teaching profession. This bill passed Ways and Means unanimously.
All right, the bill's before us as amended. Any discussion? All right, roll call.
Vice Chair Chang. Vice Chair Chang is a yea. Delegate Corman. Delegate Corman's a yea. Delegate Smith. Delegate Smith is a yea. Delegate Resnick. Delegate Resnick is a yea. Delegate Bridges. Delegate Bridges is a yea. Delegate Lewis. Delegate Lewis is a yea. Delegate Grice. Delegate Grice is a yea. Delegate Shetty. Delegate Shetty is a yea. Delegate Anderton. Delegate Anderton is a yea. Delegate Acevero. Delegate Acevero is a yea. Delegate McComas. Delegate McComas is a yea. Delegate Mangione. Delegate Mangione is a yea. Delegate Stanco. Delegate Stanco is a yea. Delegate Hannibal. Delegate Hannibal is a yea. Delegate McCaskill. Delegate McCaskill is a yea. Delegate Harris. Delegate Harris is a yea. Delegate Edelson. Delegate Edelson is a yea. Delegate Ivy. Delegate Ivy is a yea. Delegate Metzger. Delegate Metzger is a yea. Delegate Watson. Delegate Watson is a yea. Delegate Solomon. Delegate Solomon is a yea. Delegate Forbes. Delegate Forbes is a yea.
Bill passes. House Bill 802.
House Bill 802 prohibits an institution of higher education from entering into a contract with a regulated gaming entity or an agent, therefore, if under the terms of the contract, the institution of higher education receives a commission, a bonus, or any other incentive payment based on the success of securing student participation in sports wagering or online sports wagering. There are two amendments. The amendments prohibit an institution of higher education from entering into the contract. In addition, the amendments specify that presently existing obligations or contractual rights may not be impaired by the bill. This bill was unanimous in Ways and Means.
Before us as amended. I move favorable.
Second.
All right, is there any discussion on the bill? Roll call.
Vice Chair Chang. Vice Chair Chang is a yea. Delegate Corman. Delegate Corman's a yea. Delegate Smith. Delegate Smith is a yea. Delegate Resnick. Delegate Resnick is a yea. Delegate Bridges. Delegate Bridges is a yea. Delegate Lewis. Delegate Lewis is a yea. Delegate Grice. Delegate Grice is a yea. Delegate Shetty. Delegate Shetty is a yea. Delegate Anderton. Delegate Anderton is a yea. Delegate Acevero. Delegate Acevero is a yea. Delegate McComas. Delegate McComas is a yea. Delegate Mangione. Delegate Mangione is a yea. Delegate Stanco. Delegate Stanco is a yea. Delegate Hannibal. Delegate Hannibal is a yea. Delegate McCaskill. Delegate McCaskill is a yea. Delegate Harris. Delegate Harris is a yea. Delegate Edelson. Delegate Edelson is a yea. Delegate Ivy. Delegate Ivy is a yea. Delegate Metzger. Delegate Metzger is a yea. Delegate Watson. Delegate Watson is a yea. Delegate Solomon. Delegate Solomon is a yea. Delegate Forbes. Delegate Forbes is a yea.
Bill passes. House Bill 781.
This bill establishes the Equitech Growth Commission and Fund in TEDCO to support economic competitiveness and inclusive growth of emerging and advanced industries in the state. TEDCO must staff the commission, which must develop and report on strategic plan and 10-year goals by July 1st, 2025 for growing the state's innovation economy. As amended for each of its fiscal years 2025 through 2033, the governor must include an appropriation of $5 million for the program. There were two amendments to add sponsors and to add the appropriation. This was unanimous in Ways and Means.
As amended, I'll move favorable.
Second.
Any discussion on the bill? Roll call.
Vice Chair Chang. Vice Chair Chang is a yea. Delegate Corman. Delegate Corman is a yea. Delegate Smith. Delegate Smith is a yea. Delegate Resnick. Delegate Resnick is a yea. Delegate Bridges. Delegate Bridges is a yea. Delegate Lewis. Delegate Lewis is a yea. Delegate Grice. Delegate Grice is a yea. Delegate Shetty. Delegate Shetty is a yea. Delegate Anderton. Delegate Anderton is a yea. Delegate Acevero. Delegate Acevero is a yea. Delegate McComas. Delegate McComas is a yea. Delegate Mangione. Delegate Mangione is a no. Delegate Stanco. Delegate Stanco is a yea. Delegate Hannibal. Delegate Hannibal is a yea. Delegate McCaskill. Delegate McCaskill is a yea. Delegate Harris. Delegate Harris is a yea. Delegate Edelson. Delegate Edelson is a yea. Delegate Ivy. Delegate Ivy is a yea. Delegate Metzger. Delegate Metzger is a yea. Delegate Watson. Delegate Watson is a yea. Delegate Solomon. Delegate Solomon is a yea. Delegate Forbes. Delegate Forbes is a yea.
All right, the bill passes. House Bill 719 has been withdrawn by the sponsor. The motion is unfavorable withdrawn. Any discussion? Going, gone. All right, committee, we're going to just pause. We're not going to break, so everybody stay put for just 2 minutes to get some paperwork out, and then we're going to get to the state budget. All right, we are back. Welcome. Before we start, I want to just briefly commend the hard work of the subcommittees they have done to present the actions before us today. It's my first year not in subcommittee, and I've been very confident the last 2 months and the last 4 hours in the leadership of our subcommittee chairs in guiding all of us through this work. I also want to commend the administration on the work they did to deliver us an excellent budget and the collaboration they have shown, particularly Secretary Grady, who has been excellent to work with. I feel like the budget we are about to go through reflects our commitment to shared priorities, and we got there by working together. It is great, truly great to have a partner on the second floor. I also want to mention the budget before us has been a collaborative process with the Senate, and I look forward to continuing to work with Chair Gazzone and D&T even as we send the budget across the street. For the past 8 years, I've heard Chair McIntosh say each time we move the budget, it's important to pass a budget that is fiscally prudent and socially responsible. Honestly, the socially responsible part was the part that really struck me more. But having been chair here during a significant write-down, I really believe now more than ever in the importance of the fiscally prudent part of that statement. It's important to be fiscally prudent in taking care of the commitments we've already made. Commitments like funding climate solutions now, commitments to our state workers, and what I consider to be our biggest commitment, our commitment to Maryland students through the Blueprint for Maryland's Future. We've done a lot of good work as a legislature to enact these programs over the last few years, and I think this budget reflects this body's commitment to securing these promises for our future. So without further ado, let's move to Education and Economic Development, Chair Smith and Vice Chair Solomon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Mr. Vice Chair, members of the committee. I would like to thank the members of our subcommittee, Vice Chair Jared Solomon, Delegate Catherine Forbes, Delegate Jefferson Greist, Delegate Kevin Harris, and Delegate Nino Mangione. Also, I would like to thank the Vice Chair of our full committee, who attended many of our meetings and provided valuable insight in creating this report. And of course, our cherished committee counsel, and also the birthday woman of the day, Michelle Lambert.
Woo!
And the committee staff, Jewel Harris, Carol Smith, and Helen Wilson. And budget analysts, Sarah Baker, Carrie Cook, Patrick Frank, Emily Haskell, Laura Hyde, Kelly Norton, Samuel Quist, Morgan Smith, Samantha Tapia, and Ann Wagner, and Catherine Hayward, who edited this document. Beginning with the Historic St. Mary's City Commission on page 1, the subcommittee added language restricting funds pending a performance audit on the financial management practices of this commission. For the Maryland Stadium Authority on page 3, the subcommittee added language restricting funds pending the execution of agreements. On pages 5 through 7, for the Department of Labor, the subcommittee added 2 pieces of language restricting funds pending reports on addressing audit findings and on an information technology project. Narrative was also adopted on implementing a 4-day work week. Turning to the Maryland State Department of Education on pages 8 through 28, the subcommittee added 2 pieces of language restricting funds pending a report on a recent audit and on free and reduced price meal enrollment collection procedures. The subcommittee has also adopted 15 pieces of narrative requesting reports on accounting practices and federal stimulus funds, the Maryland Leads program, state teacher mobility compacts, virtual learning, child care stabilization grant awards and support for child care business practices, non-public placements, the autism waiver, the PTEC program, the child care scholarship program addressing enrollment, expenditures, customer service, and application processing, the Maryland Comprehensive Assessment Program, the Maryland School for the Blind, and federal funding for non-public schools. The subcommittee also deleted funds and struck language in the innovative programs budget and reduced general funds from the child care scholarship program and authorized the funds to be replaced with federal funds. In addition, the subcommittee adopted annual language for the aid to non-public schools and boost programs. For the Interagency Commission on School Construction on page 29, the subcommittee adopted narrative requesting a report on the implementation of Chapter 32 of 2022. On page 30, for the Accountability and Implementation Board, the subcommittee adopted narrative requesting a report on personnel and managing for results measures and deleted funds for a consultant study. On page 31 and 32 for Morgan State University, the subcommittee added language restricting funds pending a report on the status of corrective actions related to a recent audit and adopted narrative requesting a report on the National Center for the Elimination of Educational Disparities. For the Maryland Higher Education Commission on pages 33 to 37, the subcommittee adopted 8 pieces of narrative requesting reports on financial aid by expected family contribution, progress towards the 55% completion goal, non-traditional pathways, advising systems, community college enrollment decline and use of funds, guaranteed access and educational assistance grants, impact of credit completion requirement, and next generation scholars. The subcommittee also added language reducing funds for a scholarship program contingent on legislation. For higher education on pages 38 to 42, the subcommittee added language restricting funds pending a report on improving the academic approval process. The subcommittee also adopted 2 pieces of narrative requesting reports on faculty workload and programs to foster growth of the cannabis industry. The 3 items are technical and reflect actions taken by the subcommittee. On pages 43 and 44, Baltimore City Community College, the subcommittee added 2 pieces of language restricting funds pending reports on enrollment in the Mayor's Scholars Program and the realignment plan. Turning to the Department of Commerce on pages 45, the subcommittee added language requiring notification prior to the use of funds. On page 46, for the Maryland Technology Development Corporation, the subcommittee added language making funding contingent on legislation. Move, that's you, right?
Move adoption of the subcommittee report.
Question is on the adoption of the subcommittee report. Is there any discussion or questions for the subcommittee chair? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, raise your hand. Subcommittee report is adopted.
Mr. Chair, the subcommittee would like to offer the following additions to the budget to be considered by the full committee. The add items include an additional $400 million set aside in the dedicated purpose account to be transferred to the Blueprint Fund to offset future education costs. For the Maryland Stadium Authority, $250,000 to facilitate nationally televised Maryland live sports and sports documentary content, and $125,000 to conduct a market and economic feasibility study. For the Maryland State Department of Education, $10 million for the Teacher Development and Retention Fund that is contingent on legislation. $3 million to fund the state share of non-public school special education teacher salaries, contingent on legislation. $1 million to provide a grant to the Cal Ripken Senior Foundation, and $350,000 to provide a grant to the Living Classrooms Foundation. For the Maryland Higher Education Commission, $1 million for the Workforce Shortage Student Assistance Grants for scholarships established under the pilot program for Human Services Careers, contingent on legislation. $5 million for the Janet L. Hoffman Loan Assistance Repayment Program for the Nancy Grasmick Teacher Award, and $3.5 million to increase funding for the Loan Assistance Repayment Program for the police officers, contingent on legislation. $500,000 to the University of Maryland, Baltimore for the School of Dentistry. For the University of Maryland College Park, $500,000 to provide a grant to Move America Incorporated, and $250,000 for Partnership for Action Learning and Sustainability. For Bowie State University, $500,000 for the Center for Justice, Law, and Civic Engagement, and $250,000 for Student Mental Health Services. $750,000 to Towson University for the College of Health Professions. $1.2 million to the University of Maryland Eastern Shore for a state match for a federal grant. For the University of Baltimore, $1.5 million to the University of Baltimore for the Schaefer Center, and $325,000 for the Center for International and Comparative Law. $1 million to University of Maryland Global Campus to support the 3D Scholarship Program. For the Department of Commerce, $40 million for the Cannabis Business Assistance Fund, $100,000 to provide a grant to the Waterfront Partnership of Baltimore, and $100,000 to provide a grant to the Your Public Radio Corporation, and for TEDCO, $2 million for the Maryland Equitech Growth Fund contingent on legislation.
Move to adopt the following additions to the budget.
Okay, the motion is to adopt the additions as outlined by the chair. I want to particularly highlight the $400 million addition to the blueprint. Together with the $500 million that the administration provided, that means that this legislature with the administration is moving almost $1 billion to what I think is one of our top priorities in this state and something we should really be proud of. Any discussion on these additions? All right, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. The additions are adopted. Are there any other additions to the EED portion of the state budget? Delegate Grist.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to add $2 million back to Boost to make that whole, and where we'll make the cuts will be in our vacancies in our pins.
And the delegate has drafted that up through the proper channels with Department of Legislative Services. It's being passed out now. Madam Chair?
Mr. Chair, I appreciate the amendment on the floor, but I do ask for my colleagues to resist this amendment. Quite frankly, as a matter of policy, we believe that public dollars should go to public institutions, and as such, with great compassion for those students that are already participating in the Boost program, we will continue to fund their participation and that of their eligible siblings. But as appropriate, I respectfully request a resistance to this change.
Okay. Any other discussion on this amendment? All right. So a yes vote would adopt this amendment. A no vote would reject the amendment and stick with the subcommittee action. Roll call.
Vice Chair Chang. Vice Chair Chang is a no. Delegate Corman. Delegate Corman is a no. Delegate Smith.
No.
Delegate Smith is a no. Delegate Resnick. Delegate Resnick is a no. Delegate Bridges. Delegate Bridges is a no. Delegate Lewis. Delegate Lewis is a no. Delegate Grist. Delegate Grist is a yay. Delegate Shetty. Delegate Shetty is a no. Delegate Anderton. Delegate Anderton is a yay. Delegate Acevero. Delegate Acevero is a no. Delegate McComas. Delegate McComas is a yay. Delegate Mangione. Delegate Mangione is a yay. Delegate Stanco. Delegate Stanco is a yay. Delegate Hinnebaugh. Delegate Hinnebaugh is a yay. Delegate McCaskill. Delegate McCaskill is a no. Delegate Harris. Delegate Harris is a no. Delegate Edelson. No. Delegate Edelson is a no. Delegate Ivy. No. Delegate Ivy is a no. Delegate Metzger. Yes. Delegate Metzger is a yay. Delegate Watson. No. Delegate Watson is a no. Delegate Solomon.
No.
Delegate Solomon is a no. Delegate Forbes. No. Delegate Forbes is a no.
That amendment fails. Are there any other amendments to the EED budget? Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. That concludes our subcommittee report. Thank you so much, Mr. Chair.
Do we need to adopt the full subcommittee report, I think,
Oh, you have to
after
do
your
that.
additions?
Yeah.
Move to adopt the full subcommittee report.
All right. Any further discussion? If not, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Apologize, Delegate Mangione.
Mr. Chair, just a quick question, if you can repeat, what was the number for the cannabis grants? How much was that again?
40 million.
40? Okay, thank you.
Okay. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. The subcommittee report with the additions is adopted. Thank you, Madam Chair. Great work.
Thank you so
Vice
much, Mr.
Great
Chair.
work. We'll turn to HHS. Delegate Resnick and Delegate Shetty. Ready? Okay, Mr. Chair, I think we're ready.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Members of Appropriations, we're here to present the budget report for the Health and Social Services Subcommittee. Before we begin, at first I'd like to thank the members of our subcommittee, Vice Chair Emily Shetty, Delegate Jim Heinbaugh, Delegate Dana Jones, and Delegate Alethea McCaskill, and the Vice Chair who attended many of our subcommittee meetings. Committee Counsel Tyler Babich, Committee Staff Jewel Harris and Carol Smith, and the Budget Analysts Emily Haskell, Naomi Kimuro, Samuel Quist, Morgan Smith, Samantha Tapia, Ann Wagner, and Tanya Zimmerman. And I would also like to thank Hugh Norco, who edited this report. So turning to the budget and the subcommittee's actions, which start on page 1 with the Office of Deaf and Hard of Hearing. The subcommittee adopted narrative requesting cost estimates for policy options to regulate interpreters. Starting on page 2 in the Department of Aging, the subcommittee adopted narrative requesting reports on wait lists and participation in 3 programs and the status of federal stimulus spending by local area agencies on aging. On pages 4 and 5 for the Maryland Commission on Civil Rights, the subcommittee adopted narrative requesting reports on employee recruitment and retention and the status of backlogged and open cases. In the Maryland Health Benefit Exchange on page 6, the subcommittee adopted annual narrative related to the applications for state innovation waivers and a forecast for reinsurance program costs. The subcommittee's actions for the Maryland Department of Health begin on page 7 with the Office of the Secretary. The subcommittee reduced funds and amended contingent language for provider rate increases to align with the January 2024 effective date for the rate increases and added 5 pieces of budget language restricting funds pending reports that pertain to ongoing impacts of the December 2021 cybersecurity incident, department-wide staffing vacancies, placement times for court-involved patients, patient and staff safety measures, and applications and admissions to chronic care facilities and the Holly Center. The subcommittee also adopted narrative requesting reports on the opioid restitution fund and security attendant training at the Maryland Department of Health hospital system. In the Office of Healthcare Quality and Health Professional Boards and Commissions, on page 14 through 16, the subcommittee increased budgeted turnover, adopted narrative requesting reports on survey activities following the cybersecurity incident and medication prescribing and diagnosis practices in nursing homes and assisted living facilities, and added language restricting funds from the Board of Dental Examiners pending a report on the status of meeting annual performance management goals. Under Public Health Services on pages 17 through 21, the subcommittee added language restricting funds pending a report on public health personnel recruitment and retention, and adopted 5 pieces of narrative requesting reports on the Public Health Service Data Monetization Project, mobile COVID-19 vaccine clinics, reserve capacity for laboratory testing, Medicaid claiming in school-based health centers, and the Office of the Chief Medical Examiner's accreditation status and autopsy backlog. In the Behavioral Health Administration, starting on page 22, the subcommittee added 4 pieces of language to restrict funding pending reports related to the provider overpayment, recoupment, and forgiveness, statewide data on telebehavioral health utilization, accessibility of medication-assisted treatment, and a mandated report on behavioral health services for children. The subcommittee also adopted narrative requesting data on non-Medicaid behavioral health service utilization and added annual language restricting funds. The subcommittee added added language restricting funds to the program, as well as 2 pieces of language regarding $70 million for behavioral health infrastructure investments, restricting the funds for one-time uses and the renovation of the Brook Lane Hospital, and restricting a portion of the funds pending a report on the planned use of these funds. The subcommittee also reduced a general fund deficiency appropriation due to a budgeting error. In the Developmental Disabilities Administration, on pages 28 through 31, the subcommittee added annual language restricting funds and 4 pieces of language restricting funds pending reports on corrective action for repeated audit findings, performance measurement for community service waiver programs, the ongoing transition to a fee-for-service reimbursement system, and the costs of the long-term services support system and transition. In Medicaid, beginning on page 32, the committee added language restricting funds pending reports on the redetermination process and current Medicaid rates, and added 3 pieces of annual language restricting funds. Subcommittee also reduced general and federal funds based on available special funds and reduced enrollment and hospital spending expectations in fiscal 2024 and general funds in fiscal 2023 based on recoveries from MCOs due to a risk corridor. The subcommittee also adopted 5 pieces of narrative requesting reports on community option waiver financing, financial and registry data, rates for dental services, employed individuals with disability program eligibility, the community options waiver for care plan backlog, and a remote services model for adult medical day. The subcommittee also reduced the general fund deficiency for behavioral health reimbursements due to a budgeting error. On page 42 in the Health Regulatory Commissions, the subcommittee adopted narrative requesting a report on the Maryland Primary Care Program.
Actions pertaining to the Department of Human Services begin on page 43 with language restricting funds under the Office of the Secretary, pending a report on oversight of the local departments of social services. In the Social Services Administration, beginning on page 44, the subcommittee adopted 3 pieces of narrative requesting reports on the length of hospital stays for youth in out-of-home placements, implementation of the Family First Prevention Services Act, and implementation of a new foster care provider rate structure. In the Operations Office, Office of Technology for Human Services and Local Family Investment on pages 47 through 49, the subcommittee adopted 3 pieces of narrative requesting reports on the department's recruitment and retention strategy, external utilization of the MD Think platform, conversions to regular state positions. In foster care maintenance payments and child welfare services on pages 49 through 51, the subcommittee added 2 pieces of annual language restricting funds for those respective purposes only and adopted narrative requesting a report on child welfare caseload data. In the Assistance Payments Program, beginning on page 51, the subcommittee added language restricting general funds for public benefits programs to those purposes and reduced federal funds that are not needed. The subcommittee also adopted 3 pieces of narrative requesting reports on application processing times, denial rates and case closures, summer SNAP, and a new nationwide summer program, and separately identifying certain spending. For the Child Support Administration on page 55, the subcommittee adopted narrative requesting reports on child support performance. In the Family Investment Administration, beginning on page 56, the subcommittee added language restricting general funds pending the resolution of repeat audit findings. In the Office of Home Energy Programs, the subcommittee adopted 2 pieces of narrative requesting reports on energy assistance application processing times and denial rates and implementation of categorical eligibility for energy assistance benefits and a centralized administrative model. Lastly, in the Department of Housing and Community Development on page 59, the subcommittee adopted narrative requesting that broadband funding be separately identified in a unique program code in the budget. We move the adoption of the subcommittee report.
All right, is there any discussion on the adoption of the subcommittee report? If not, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. The subcommittee report is adopted. Mr. Chair?
The subcommittee would like to offer the following additions to the budget to be considered by the full committee. The add items include, for the Maryland Department of Health, $8 million to support the Maryland Board of Nursing infrastructure operations contingent on legislation, $3.5 million to implement the Maryland State Plan to address Alzheimer's disease and related dementias, $3.5 million to increase provider reimbursement rates for abortion care services under Medicaid, and $1.5 million for grants to providers of family planning services. For the Department of Human Services, $5 million for assistance to immigrants relocated from other areas and resettled in Maryland, $500,000 for a grant to Adoptions Together for the Family Fine Step Down project, $50,000 for stipends established under the pilot program for human services careers contingent on legislation, $5 million under MIMS for the Maryland Emergency Medical Services Operations Fund, and $1 million for the Prescription Drug Affordability Board's operating expenses. Move to adopt the following additions to the budget.
Would anyone like to pull any of these various items out? Delegate Grist.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The abortion funding, those 2 lines that are $3.5 and $1.5 million, and also the immigrant relocation for $5.
All right, we're going to pull those out separately. We're going to vote on the remaining items now, and we'll discuss those in a moment. On the remaining items, is there any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Those are adopted. Delegate Grist, would you like separate votes on these, or do you want to vote them together?
We can vote it all together.
Okay.
Yeah.
Roll call on the 3 items. It's $3.5 million for increase in provider reimbursement rates for abortion care services, $1.5 million for grants for providers of family planning services, and the $5 million for immigrant relocation. Yes vote adopts these provisions, and no vote rejects them. Roll call.
Vice Chair Chang. Yes. Vice Chair Chang is a yay. Delegate Corman. Delegate Corman is a yay. Delegate Smith. Delegate Smith is a yay. Delegate Resnick.
Yes.
Delegate Resnick is a yay. Delegate Bridges. Delegate Bridges is a yay. Delegate Lewis. Delegate Lewis is a yay. Delegate Christ. Delegate Christ is a no. Delegate Shetty.
Yes.
Delegate Shetty is a yay. Delegate Anderson. No. Delegate Anderson is a no. Delegate Acevero. Delegate Acevero is a yay. Delegate McComas. Delegate McComas is a no. Delegate Mangione. Delegate Mangione is a no. Delegate Stanco. Delegate Stanco is a no. Delegate Hannibal. Delegate Hannibal is a no. Delegate McCaskill. Delegate McCaskill is a yay. Delegate Harris. Delegate Harris is a yay. Delegate Edelson. Delegate Edelson is a yay. Delegate Ivy. Delegate Ivy is a yay. Delegate Metzger. Delegate Metzger is a no. Delegate Watson. Delegate Watson is a yay. Delegate Solomon. Delegate Solomon is a yay. Delegate Forbes. Delegate Forbes is a yay.
Those provisions are adopted. Mr. Chair, do you want to move the full report as amended?
Move the report as amended.
Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. The ayes have it. Great job, Mr. Chair, Madam
you.
Vice Chair. Excellent work. We'll move to Public Safety and Administration Subcommittee. Delegates Bridges and Ivy.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chair. I would first like to thank the members of the subcommittee, my Vice Chair, Delegate Julian Ivy, Delegate Gabrielle Acevero, Delegate Susan McComas, and Delegate Joshua Stanco, and Vice Chair Chang for his work with the committee as well. Ken Weaver, who staffs the subcommittee, and Carol Smith and Joel Harris, who each staffed each meeting, and our budget analysts, Jacob Cash, Patrick Frank, Ryan Green, Jason Kramer, Madeline Miller, Jacob Polakov, Morgan Smith, Samantha Tapia, and Brett Ogden, who formatted and edited the document. On pages 1 and 2 in the judiciary, the subcommittee added language that restricts funds for indigent individuals so they can only be used for that purpose, and adopted narrative pertaining to the appointed attorney program, necessary judgeships, major IT projects, and core performance measures. In the Office of the Public Defender on page 3, the subcommittee adopted narrative requesting a caseload standards report. On page 4, in the Office of the Attorney General, reports were requested on the Independent Investigations Division and access to counsel and evictions program. On page 5, in the Board of Public Works, the subcommittee adopted annual language requiring the Maryland Zoo in Baltimore to provide audited financial and attendance data. In the Governor's Boards, Commissions, and Offices on page 6, the subcommittee deleted funds for the Maryland Core Program that were duplicative that we plan to use to have for funding for schools, and adopted narrative requiring a report on agency MBE participation attainment and liaison surveys. Actions related to the Governor's Office on Crime Prevention, Youth, and Victim Services are on pages 7 to 11. The subcommittee added 3 pieces of language addressing grants management, information about Victims of Crime Act grants, and the allocation of the police aid enhancement. On page 12, in the State Board of Elections, the committee added narrative requiring reports on new and ongoing major information technology development projects. In the Military Department, on pages 13 and 14, the subcommittee adopted narrative requiring a report on National Guard health insurance, reduced funds for the TRICARE reimbursement program, and added a technical amendment to strike language. On page 15, in the Maryland Department of Emergency Management, the subcommittee adopted narrative requesting an update on the construction of Mesonet weather tracking system. In the Department of Veteran Affairs, on page 16, the subcommittee adopted narrative requiring a report on the Charlotte Hall Veterans Home population and funding. On page 17, in the West North Avenue Development Authority, the subcommittee adopted narrative requiring the agency to provide management for results data and a grants manual. In the Comptroller of Maryland, on page 18, the subcommittee adopted annual narrative on major IT project reporting. And in the State Treasurer's Office, on page 19, narrative requesting rating agency reports prior to bond sales were adopted. The State Department of Assessment and Taxation is on pages 20 to 22. The subcommittee adopted narrative regarding vacancies, new eligibility requirements for tax credits, the major IT project, and fraud-related enforcement and lost revenue. Pages 23 to 25 have actions related to the Department of Information Technology. General funds for 2 major IT projects will not be needed, so the subcommittee reduced funding. Narrative regarding quarterly progress reports and managing for results efficiency indicators were also adopted. On page 26, the subcommittee required managing for results training indicators and a state center status report in the Department of General Services. In the Department of Service and Civic Innovation on page 27, the subcommittee added language making part of the appropriations contingent on legislation establishing the program. Narrative on potential revenues for the Maryland Emergency Medical System Operations Fund was adopted on page 28, and pages 29 and 30 pertain to the Department of Public Safety and Correctional Services Administration. The subcommittee adopted 5 pieces of committee narrative requesting reports on the Justice Reinvestment Act, recidivism, contraband, major IT projects, and correctional program participation measures. In the Division of Corrections on page 31 to 33, the subcommittee added language restricting funds for reports on numerical hiring goals and quarterly hiring and attrition rates. Narrative requiring an inmate health care report was also adopted. On page 34, in Community Supervision, the subcommittee adopted narrative requiring a caseload report. Language restricting funds pending a report on overtime and assaults was added to the Division of Pretrial Detention and Services on pages 35 and 36. In the Department of State Police on pages 37 and 38, the subcommittee adopted narrative on the status of the Workforce Diversity Action Plan. And at the end of the report on pages 39 to 41, the subcommittee added annual back of the bill sections regarding the Unified Crime Report and out-of-home placement. That concludes the subcommittee's report.
Move the adoption of the subcommittee report.
Any discussion on the subcommittee report? All right, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. The ayes have it.
The subcommittee would like to offer the following additions to the budget to be considered by the full committee. In the State Treasurer's Office, $6.7 million to implement the transition of the Maryland 529 program into the State Treasurer's Office, and $1.8 million for the Financial Systems Modernization Major IT Project. In the Comptroller of Maryland, $5.3 million for document management and customer relations IT projects. In the Judiciary, $3.5 million for the Maryland Legal Services Corporation. In the Alcohol and Tobacco Commission, $2 million for the Social Equity Partnership Grant Program, contingent on legislation creating the program. In the Governor's Office of Crime Prevention, Youth and Victim Services, $1 million for a grant to the Maryland Coalition Against Sexual Assault for support of community rape crisis centers, $1 million to increase funds for domestic violence centers across the state, and $250,000 to increase grant funding for the Young Readers Matching Grant Program. In the Department of Juvenile Services, $1 million to provide grant funding to ROCA, Inc. In the Office of the Secretary of State, $982,000 to provide grant funding to sister states of Maryland. In the Department of Public Safety and Correctional Services, $500,000 for police and correctional training commissions to establish requirements, procedures, and prohibitions relating to the use of facial recognition technology by a law enforcement agency. In the Office of the Attorney General, $250,000 in one regular position to hire a special education ombudsman. And in the Board of Public Works, $194,000 to provide an operating grant to Historic Annapolis.
Move to adopt the following additions to the budget.
Would anyone like to pull any of these additions out for a separate vote? Seeing none, we'll vote them as a package. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. They are adopted.
That concludes our subcommittee report.
You want to move the,
I'm sorry, move the full committee report, subcommittee report,
as amended?
as amended.
All right. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. It's adopted. Great work. Thank you all. We'll move to the Transportation Environment Subcommittee.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, colleagues. Before we begin, of course, I'd like to thank my subcommittee members, my wonderful vice chair, Delegate Watson, as well as Delegates Anderton, Edelson, Lewis, and Metzger, and of course our vice chair, Delegate Chang, who attended many of the subcommittee's hearings. We'd also like to thank our subcommittee staff, Ken Weaver, and our great committee support, Carol Smith and Jewel Harris, and of course all of our wonderful DLS budget analysts, Kerry Cook, Andrew Gray, Ryan Green, Steve McCulloch, Samuel Quist, and Samantha Tapia, and Kaylee Cannon, who edited this document. For the Public Service Commission, on pages 1 and 2, the subcommittee adopted 3 pieces of committee narrative requesting reports on the judicial appeals process for commission decisions, the process that the commission uses to ensure accuracy in the submission of legal filings, and enforcement actions taken against third-party retail energy suppliers. For the Maryland Energy Administration, on pages 3 through 5, the subcommittee increased turnover for 10 new positions, deleted funding from the Maryland Gas Expansion Fund, and requested 2 reports through narrative on Strategic Energy Investment Fund expenditures and federal grant funding available through federal stimulus legislation. On page 6, for the Maryland Automobile Insurance Fund, the subcommittee requested 2 reports through narrative on solutions to the problem of declining surplus in both the insured and uninsured divisions, and for 10-year surplus and assessment ratio histories. On page 7, for the Maryland Insurance Administration, the subcommittee requested 2 reports on rate setting, methodologies for Maryland Auto, and on the ongoing upgrades of the insurance tracking system. On page 8, the subcommittee deleted funds budgeted in the Maryland Lottery and Gaming Control Agency for televised lottery drawings, since televised drawings are, unfortunately, no longer being done. Action pertaining to the Maryland Department of Transportation begins on page 9. On pages 9 through 11, the subcommittee added annual language requiring notification of changes to the capital program and establishing a position cap for the department. In the Secretary's office, on pages 12 through 14, the subcommittee asked for reports on fees other states impose on zero and low emission vehicles and on the ability to flex federal funds between highway and transit programs. The subcommittee also added annual language restricting spending for operating grants and aid in the amount in the budget as submitted and requiring notification of changes to the capital program. On page 15, for the Washington Metropolitan Area Transit Authority, the subcommittee requested a report on transit-oriented development strategies. On pages 16 through 18, in MDOT debt service requirements, the subcommittee added 3 pieces of annual language, establishing debt limits for traditional and non-traditional debt, and requiring a report on non-traditional debt issuances. On page 19, in the Maryland Transit Administration, the subcommittee added language requiring status reports on the Purple Line light rail project. On page 20, for the Maryland Aviation Administration, the subcommittee adopted narrative requesting a report on the potential for installing solar arrays at BWI Marshall Airport. On pages 21 and 22 for the Department of Natural Resources, the subcommittee added language restricting funding pending submission of the 2010 Trust Fund annual work and expenditure plans and adopted narrative on Chesapeake Bay restoration spending. On page 23 in the Department of Agriculture, the subcommittee reduced the Maryland Agricultural and Resource-Based Industry Development Corporation's Next Generation Farmland Acquisition Program funding. In the Department of the Environment, on pages 24 through 27, the subcommittee added 3 pieces of language restricting funding pending the submission of the Maryland Scrap Tire Report, correct budgeting of personnel expenditures, and a revised fee structures report. The subcommittee also added 2 new pieces of narrative requesting reports on a text alert system for environmental accidents and ambient air monitoring. On page 28 for the Maryland Environmental Service, the subcommittee adopted narrative requesting that MES submit a funding statement that describes their fund balances and reserve funds, overhead rates, and funding for reimbursable projects. Sections added by the subcommittee are included on pages 29 through 32. On page 29, the subcommittee added annual language restricting funding pending a report on Chesapeake Bay restoration spending. Beginning on the bottom of page 30, the subcommittee restricted funding pending the submission of quarterly enforcement and inspection position information.
Move the adoption of the subcommittee report.
Okay, the question is on the adoption of the subcommittee report. Is there any discussion? If not, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. The ayes have it.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The subcommittee would like to offer the following additions to the budget to be considered by the full committee. In the Public Service Commission, $9.25 million in special funds for repair of existing natural gas infrastructure within the Washington Gas Service area. In the Department of Planning, $500,000 in general funds for a grant to cover the operating shortfalls of the Maryland Center for History and Culture. $500,000 general funds for a pass-through grant for the Strengthening the Humanities Investment in Nonprofits for Equity, or SHINE program within Maryland Humanities. $200,000 in general funds for a grant to Amtrak to restore an historic train map at the Baltimore Penn Station facility. Delegate Grice, don't you dare go after that one. In the Maryland Department of Agriculture, $6 million in general funds for the Maryland Agricultural and Resource-Based Industry Development Corporation's core loan programs. $825,000 general funds for the Maryland Agricultural Fair Board to promote state and county agricultural fairs and exhibits. And $200,000 in general funds for the Maryland Department of Agriculture to provide grants to state organizations that provide spay and neuter services for cats and dogs.
Move to adopt the additions to the budget.
All right, would anyone like to pull any of these items out for a separate vote? Train sign, Delegate Grace? Okay. All right, any other discussion on these additions? All in favor say aye. Opposed, no. They're adopted.
Move to adopt the full committee report as amended.
All right, any further discussion? All in favor, say aye. Opposed, no. That's adopted. Excellent work. Thank you, too. We'll now turn to the Capital Budget Subcommittee. Chair Chang and Vice Chair.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman and members of the House Appropriations Committee. On behalf of Vice Chair Lewis and myself, we would like to thank the members of the subcommittee for all their work on this subcommittee on the capital budget with the PAYGO. First, Delegate Tony Bridges, Delegate Catherine M. Forbes, Delegate Jefferson Grice, Delegate Mark Corman, Delegate Rick Metzger, Delegate Kirill Resnick, Delegate Stephanie Smith, and Delegate Gerald Salomon. The Committee Counsel, Michelle Lambert, the Committee Support, Carol Smith and Jewel Harris, the Budget Analysts, Sarah Jean Baker, Carrie Cook, Patrick Frank, Andrew Gray, Ryan Green, Emily Haskell, Laura Hyde, Matthew Klein, Madeline Miller, Kelly Norton, Samuel Quist, and Morgan Smith, and Kate Lee Cannon, who edited this document. Actions pertaining to the Department of General Services can be found on pages 1 and 2. The subcommittee added language allocating the general and special fund appropriations consistent with the governor's intent. On pages 3 and 4, in the Department of Housing and Community Development, the subcommittee added language restricting funds in the Strategic Demolition Fund for specific projects and adopted a narrative requesting that anticipated federal funds be in the capital improvement program.
Move the adoption of the subcommittee report.
The subcommittee report, is there any discussion? If not, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. I think we should mention here that many of the House capital priorities are not here in PAYGO, so for the public and for the committee, you'll see many of our House capital priorities in our traditional GO capital budget passed next week. So just put that in your, take note. Anything else, Mr. Chairman?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. The subcommittee would like to offer the following additions to the budget to be considered by the full committee. $109.2 million for the Healthy School Facility Fund and the Public School Construction Program Fund with cash rather than general obligation bond funding. This would create capacity in the bond-funded portion of the capital program for additional capital items, including legislative bond initiatives, when the full committee budget bill. $25.7 million for the Baltimore City Convention Center, $2 million for the Institute of Health Computing to be administered by the University of Maryland Baltimore campus, $6 million for the Northwest Hospital Center project, $10 million for the University of Maryland Shore Regional Hospital, $93.2 million for 23 miscellaneous capital projects.
Move the adoption to the following additions to the budget.
These additions, would anyone like to pull out any of these additions? If not, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. The ayes have it.
Mr. Chairman, move to the report for the Capital Subcommittee.
All right, any further discussion on the capital subcommittee report? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. The ayes have it. I will also note many of these additions and some additions you'll hear later are, as I said at the outset, things that we've collaborated with the administration, things that we've worked together, particularly Shore Hospital and some other capital county additions we're going to have later. So I want to make sure that everyone knows that the administration has been responsible for many of these adds. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
We're going to now just pause for a minute while we go to our full committee subcommittee. Rebecca Ruff is going to walk us through the decision document, so we'll allow a minute for some documents to be handed out. Just take a couple of minutes, so stay put. Ready? All right. Welcome, Ms. Ruff.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm here to help walk you through the actions that pertain to the agency budgets that you heard in full committee. So you should all have two documents that have been provided to you. One is thicker, and it is labeled decision document on the front. And the other one, the thinner one, is has a bold title at the top that says Section 19, Additions to the Budget, the majority of which just reflect the language that you already heard proposed by the individual subcommittees, with a few full committee additions that we will cover after we get through the thick decision document. So we have our budget analysts with us today, and they will be walking through the document in budget code order, starting with page 1.
On page 1 is the payments to civil divisions of the state. DLS recommended concurring, and the agency concurred.
Discussion? All in favor say aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it.
On page 2 is the General Assembly budget. The recommendation is to concur with the budget as approved by the Legislative Policy Committee. Recommendation, agency concurred.
Mr. Chairman, move to adopt.
Motion is to adopt. Any discussion? All in favor say aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it.
On page 3, for the Department of Budget and Management, Office of the Secretary, DLS recommended committee narrative requesting contract and grant details be submitted with the budget books, and the agency concurred.
Mr. Chairman, move to adopt. Second.
Any discussion? All in favor say aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it.
The second recommended action from DLS is to amend Section 2 in the budget bill to limit appropriations that can be placed into contingency reserves to those items restricted by the General Assembly. The agency disagrees with that recommended action.
Mr. Chairman, move to adopt.
Motion is to adopt. Is there any discussion? All in favor say aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it.
On page 4, recommended action number 3 for DBM Secretary is to amend Section 17 to add tracking structure necessary for legislative audits and to disallow transfers for other purposes. And the agency disagrees.
Mr. Chairman, move to adopt. Second.
Any discussion? All in favor say aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it.
On page 6, recommended action number 4 for DBM Secretary is to add a section requiring long-term general fund, blueprint for Maryland Futures Fund, and higher education current unrestricted fund accounts. The agency concurs.
Mr. Chairman, move to adopt. Second.
The motion is to adopt. Any discussion? All in favor say aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it.
On page 7, recommended action number 5 is to add a section applying across-the-board reductions to institutions of higher education, and the agency concurs.
Mr. Chairman, move to adopt. Second.
Motion is to adopt. Any discussion? All in favor say aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it.
Recommended action number 6 is adding a section requiring consistent reporting of federal monies received by the state, and the agency concurs.
Mr. Chairman, move to adopt. Second.
Motion is to adopt. Any discussion? All in favor say aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it.
On page 8, recommended action number 7 is to add a section defining the use of federal funds in the budget, and the agency concurs.
Mr. Chairman, move to adopt. Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor say aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it.
On page 9, recommended action number 8 is to add a section requiring consistent presentation of budget data and organizational charts, and the agency concurs.
Mr. Chairman, move to adopt. Second.
Any discussion? All in favor say aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it.
On page 11, recommended action number 9 is to add a section requiring reporting on interagency agreements and approval by DBM, and the agency concurs.
Mr. Chairman, move to adopt. Second.
Motion is to adopt. Any discussion? All in favor say aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it.
On page 13, recommended action number 10 is to add a section defining the budget amendment process, and the agency concurs.
Mr. Chairman, move to adopt. Second.
Motion is to adopt. Any discussion? All in favor say aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it.
Finally, for DBM Secretary, or actually, sorry, there's 2 more recommended actions for DBM Secretary on page 16. Number 11 is to add a section requiring the maintenance of accounting systems for certain programs, and the agency concurs.
Mr. Chairman, move to adopt. Second.
Motion is to adopt. All in favor say aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it.
And on page 18, recommended action number 12 is to add a section requiring notification within 10 days before applying for competitive grants that have a state match and requiring quarterly reports summarizing competitive grant applications. And the agency concurs.
Mr. Chairman, move to adopt. Second.
Motion is to adopt. Any discussion? All in favor say aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it.
On page 20, in the Department of Budget and Management Personnel, item number 1, DLS recommended annual committee narrative requesting a report on the health insurance account, and the agency concurred.
Mr. Chair, move to adopt.
Any discussion? All in favor, say aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it.
Item number 2, DLS recommended quarterly reporting on medical, dental, and prescription plan performance. The agency concurred.
Mr. Chair, move to adopt.
Any discussion? All in favor, say aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it.
On page 21, item number 3, DLS recommended requesting a progress report on reducing the state's vacancy rate. The agency concurred.
Mr. Chair, move to adopt. Second.
Motion is to adopt. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it.
On page 22, item number 4, DLS recommended adding language to the budget expressing the intent of the General Assembly that funds for the 2% cost of living adjustment not be transferred prior to January 1st of 2024 to determine which agencies have made progress in filling vacant positions. The agency concurred.
Mr. Chair, move to adopt. Second.
Any discussion? All in favor, say aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it.
Items number 5 and 6 on page 22, you should reject because they were accomplished in the supplemental budget.
Mr. Chairman, move to reject the actions taken in supplemental number 1.
Motion is to reject. All in favor, say aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it.
Item number 7 at the bottom of page 22, DLS recommended a $25 million reduction in the deficiency appropriation for the cost of living adjustment that's unneeded due to savings in agency budgets. The agency concurred.
Mr. Chair, move to adopt. Second.
Motion is to adopt. All in favor, say aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it.
On page 23, item number 8 is a recommendation for annual language on workers' compensation insurance reporting. The agency concurred.
Mr. Chair, move to adopt.
Any discussion? All in favor, say aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it.
Item number 9 is annual language requiring reporting on position creation, and the agency concurred.
Mr. Chair, move to adopt. Second.
Motion is to adopt. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it.
On page 25, item number 10, DLS recommended annual language on providing a report on the number of authorized positions in the state. The agency concurred.
Mr. Chair, move to adopt. Second.
Any discussion? All in favor, say aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it.
On page 26, item number 11, DLS recommended annual language on reporting on the health insurance spending and and receipts. The agency concurred.
Mr. Chairman, move to adopt. Second.
Any discussion? All in favor, say aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it.
On page 28, item number 12, DLS recommended annual language on regarding abolished positions. The agency concurred.
Mr. Chairman, move to adopt.
Motion is to adopt. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it.
On page 28, additional DLS recommendation. In light of the revenue write-down, DLS was asked to provide additional recommendations. This would reduce the fiscal 2024 allowance by $65 million in general funds to reflect an increase in the statewide budgeted turnover rate by 1.5 percentage points.
Mr. Chairman, move to adopt. Second.
Motion is to adopt. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it.
Moving on to the State Retirement Agency, on page 29, DLS recommended concurring, and the agency concurred.
Mr. Chairman, move to adopt. Second.
Motion is to adopt. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it.
On page 30, in the Maryland Supplemental Retirement Plans, DLS recommended concurring, and the agency concurred.
Mr. Chairman, move to adopt.
Any discussion? All in favor, say aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it.
The public data is on page 31. DLS's recommendation is to concur. Agency concurs.
Mr. Chairman, move to adopt. Second.
Any discussion? All in favor, say aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it.
On page 32 are the actions pertaining to the State Reserve Fund. Items number 1 and 2 are related. The budget as introduced included a contingent reduction of $61.4 million, which is the remainder of the appropriation to the rainy day fund. DLS is recommending that you take the cut directly so that you have the authority to reappropriate it for your priorities. And as such, item number 1 would strike the contingent language. The agency concurred with both items.
Mr. Chairman, move to adopt.
Motion is to adopt. Any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor, say aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it.
Item number 3 is also technical language to strike items that DLS is recommending that you take direct reductions. Mr. Chair, I would actually recommend that the committee reject this item because of actions that we are proposing on the next pages.
Mr. Chairman, move to reject.
Motion is to reject. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it.
Item number 4, DLS has recommended a direct reduction of the $150 million that the administration had provided and set aside for legislative priorities. The agency concurred.
Mr. Chairman, move to adopt.
Motion is to adopt. All in favor say aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it.
Item number 5, DLS had recommended a $10 million reduction because the payment to the repayment to the local income tax reserve account is not actually needed. However, I would recommend that you reject this item as supplemental budget number 1 recognized the withdrawal of these funds.
Mr. Chairman, move to reject. Action was taken supplemental number 1.
Motion is to reject. Any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor say aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it.
At the bottom of page 33, you can see that there are 3 additional actions for your consideration. In light of the revenue write-down, DLS was asked to look for and identify additional savings. We're recommending that you reduce the $15 million pension sweeper repayment. It's noted that the fiscal 2024 budget would still meet the pension obligations and fund them above the actuarially required contribution by $75 million if you were to take this reduction.
Move to adopt. Second.
Any discussion? Motion is to adopt. All in favor say aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it.
The other recommendation that we have is to delete the payment of $25 million towards the OPEB liability.
Mr. Chairman, move to adopt. Second.
Any discussion? All in favor say aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it.
Item number R4, which is at the bottom of page 33 and continues on to the next page, is the technical language that strikes the reduced appropriations from the detail for the dedicated purpose account.
Mr. Chairman, move to adopt.
Motion is to adopt. Any discussion? All in favor say aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it.
And on page 34, there's 2 related color page items. This is a recommendation to reduce the $500 million that the administration had set aside for future transportation capital priorities, I believe with the intent of supporting your reappropriated legislative additions. CP1 is the technical correction to strike the contingent language, and CP2 is directly reducing those funds.
Mr. Chairman, move to adopt. Second.
All right, moving to adopt CP1 and CP2. All in favor say aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it.
That completes the committee's work within the decision document. The other item that we have for you is the draft of the language that would appropriate all of the additions to the budget. I believe there were a few additions for the full committee to consider.
Mr. Chairman.
Delegate Corman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move that the full committee add the following items to the fiscal 2024 budget. $100 million in general funds set aside in the dedicated purpose account to support the state match for future federal grant awards and to fund future environmental studies for the Red Line and Southern Maryland Rapid Transit projects. $11.95 million in general funds to the Department of Budget and Management for the portion of implementing HB 982 that would provide a contribution of up to $600 to employees participating in the state supplemental retirement plans under certain circumstances. $10.3 million to the payments to civil divisions of the state to grant Baltimore City and Kent County with funds to be used to increase the local contribution for public education, and $200,000 set aside in the dedicated purpose account to provide future technical assistance in implementing HB 261.
All right, any discussion on these items? Does anyone want to pull out any of these items? Hearing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. These items are adopted.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Vice Chair.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. On behalf of the members of the House Appropriations Committee and the staff of the House Appropriations Committee, we want to congratulate you in serving in your first session as chair of the House Appropriations Committee. Thank you very much. Thank you so much for your leadership during your first session, leading the budgetary process with dignity and grit. And because of your mastery of the state budget, you've been able to produce a budget that is fiscally prudent, socially responsible. And our budget is a reflection of the values we have in our state. And the budget that we have worked on and present to you and present to the public is a budget that leaves no one behind. It's inclusive, includes all people of all 24 jurisdictions, over 6 million people in the state of Maryland. And we are thankful for your leadership, from the members who are brand new serving on this committee to the veterans. You have been a compassionate leader, a leader who has been determined, and also a leader who inspires us. We're so thankful for that. Yesterday, we received the Board of Revenue estimates, and in the face of fiscal uncertainty, your steadfastness and your resolve has laid the foundation for a budget that will be able to weather uncertainty. It's a great honor, and it's great, with great humility, that I serve as your partner on this Appropriations Committee. And with great pride, I make the motion to move House Bill 200 as amended.
Second.
The motion is to move the budget of the state of Maryland, which I will emphasize is a collaborative effort with everyone in this room. All right, we're going to roll call on the budget of the state of Maryland.
Vice Chair Chang. Vice Chair Chang is a yay. Delegate Corman. Delegate Corman is a yay. Delegate Smith. Delegate Smith is a yay. Delegate Resnick. Delegate Resnick is a yay. Delegate Bridges. Delegate Bridges is a yay. Delegate Lewis. Delegate Lewis is a yay. Delegate Grice. Delegate Grice is a yay. Delegate Shetty. Delegate Shetty is a yay. Delegate Anderton. Delegate Anderton is a yay. Delegate Acevero. Delegate Acevero is a yay. Delegate McComas. Delegate McComas is a yay. Delegate Mangione. Delegate Mangione is a no. Delegate Stanko.
Yes.
Delegate Stanko is a yay. Delegate Hinnenbaugh. Delegate Hinnenbaugh is a yay. Delegate McCaskill. Delegate McCaskill is a yay. Delegate Harris. Delegate Harris is a yay. Delegate Edelson. Delegate Edelson is a yay. Delegate Ivy. Delegate Ivy is a yay. Delegate Metzger. Delegate Metzger is a yay. Delegate Watson. Delegate Watson is a yay. Delegate Solomon. Delegate Solomon is a yay. Delegate Forbes. Delegate Forbes is a.
Well, we have a budget, but it's out of balance, so we need a BRFA. Tanya Zimmerman is here to walk us through the BRFA. Welcome.
All right, so House Bill 202 is the BRFA. As introduced, it relieves the rainy day fund, the requirement to appropriate funds to the rainy day fund, and then also lowers the Medicaid deficit assessment. There are 6 amendments to the BRFA. The first is technical. The second amendment broadens the specialties for which faculty must be provided at the University of Maryland Capital Region Medical Center. The third amendment removes the requirement to repay the local reserve account over 15 years from the recalculated homeowners tax credit that was provided under Chapter 717 and 718 of 2021. The funds are provided in the fiscal 2023 budget as a deficiency appropriation to fully repay contingent on legislation. The fourth amendment extends the date by which a portion of the Bainbridge Naval Training Center must be transferred to the Department of Natural Resources by 1 year. The fifth is one of the additional recommendations of DLS given the revenue write-downs. This is a surplus that was identified in the Assistance Payments Program in the Department of Human Services for fiscal 2023. It reduces $7.5 million in general funds due to lower than anticipated caseloads. And the final amendment requires the transfer of $9.25 million from the Maryland Gas Expansion Fund to be used for repair of existing natural gas infrastructure in the Washington Gas service territory to the Public Service Commission.
Is there a motion on the amendments? All right, we have a motion and a second to adopt the amendments. Any discussion? All in favor say aye. Opposed, no. The amendments are adopted. Is there a motion on the Budget Reconciliation Financing Act? It's been moved and seconded. All in favor say aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it. We now have a balanced budget. Before we leave, I just want to make a couple of thank yous of my own. First, foremost, Department of Legislative Services. We could not do this work without the long, hard hours you all put in. Dave Romans, Tanya Zimmerman, Rebecca Ruff, Matt Klein, all of the analysts who have worked so hard for us to make us look good. Thank you all so much. Our committee staff, Carol, Jewel, Helen, Tony, and Debbie for all their hard work in running the subcommittees. It takes a lot to make this group look good, and you do it. Committee councils, Ken, Tyler, and Michelle, our senior counsel, thank you for all the work you do and your support in our budget process. Lastly, I just want to thank the members of the committee and the hard work you all have put in. This is the first year that you've had the responsibility to add to this budget, a responsibility given to you all by the voters of the state of Maryland. And I think you did so judiciously in a very responsible manner. I think you can be proud that this budget leaves here with historic levels of rainy day fund, historically high fund balance. We've achieved the SAC goal despite the write-down of $100 million to the structural good, actually above that. And so I think we have a budget that's met our priorities while maintaining our fiscal responsibility. So congratulations to our committee, and thanks for all your great work. We're adjourned.